She came to my hall in the last week of the cold season, with 2 trunks of belongings and the expression of someone who had decided, before arriving, exactly how much of herself she was going to give. Not much, that was the answer, and I respected it. The arrangement had been my counsel's idea, formalized over 3 months of border negotiations with the remnants of the Asheville line, what remained of a pack that had been on the losing side of 2 territorial disputes and had spent the decades since being absorbed, piece by piece, into Caldenmere's administrative ledger. The Asheville Alpha was dead. His heir was dead. His second heir had left for the Eastern Territories. What remained was a family name. A claim to a border corridor Caldenmere needed formalized, and a daughter of the line who had been teaching children in a border village schoolroom for 4 years, because it was the most useful thing she could find to do with what was left of her world. Her name was Marin. I knew it from the paperwork. I knew she was 26, that she had no wolf rank formally recognized in Caldenmere's records, that she had completed a full healer's secondary education before the Asheville losses made further schooling impossible, that she had lived in the border village of Cresthalo since she was 22. I knew these things the way I knew most things in my kingdom, from documents accurately, without attachment. I met her in the entrance hall when she arrived. My steward had suggested I might send a representative, and I had overruled him, because, whatever the arrangement was, I was going to conduct it with the directness I required of everyone who dealt with Caldenmere. She would know from the first moment what kind of king she was dealing with. She knew. She looked at me across the entrance hall with the level gaze of someone who had also decided to be direct, which was the first thing that surprised me, and said, "My lord, I understand the terms of the arrangement. I have one request before I agree formally." I said, "State it." "Never ask me to pretend I am content when I am not," she said. "I will be civil, I will be appropriate, I will not make your hall difficult. But I will not perform happiness I don't have." I looked at her for a moment. She was not challenging me. She was informing me, with the precision of someone who had learned to be precise about what she could and could not sustain. "Agreed," I said. She nodded once, not gratefully, not with relief, simply confirming that the terms were now mutual, and my steward showed her to her quarters. I watched her go and thought, this is going to be a manageable arrangement. She will keep to herself. I will keep to myself. The border corridor will be formalized. No one will be inconvenienced beyond the necessary minimum. I was wrong about several things in that assessment. It took me approximately 7 months to understand how wrong. The first week she was simply present. She took her meals in the great hall when they were served. She sat at the lower end of the long oak table with the quiet of someone who is comfortable with her own company. She responded when spoken to, and did not press for more conversation than was offered. My council members noted her existence with the vague approval of men who had expected more disruption. My pack steward reported that she had already memorized the domestic schedule and was not creating any irregularities in it. I noticed that she read at breakfast, not performatively, not the way someone reads to be seen reading, but with the absorbed focus of a person for whom books are company rather than display. She brought a different volume every morning. She did not comment on them unless someone asked. No one asked for 3 weeks. I asked on the 23rd day because I had been watching the spines from across the table and could not determine the subject matter, and this was, I told myself, simply a question of administrative awareness. "What are you reading?" I said. She looked up. There was a brief recalibration in her expression, the slight adjustment of someone who had not expected this particular voice to address her at the breakfast table. "Border ecology of the Caldenmere Midlands," she said. "I'm trying to understand the territory." "Why?" I said. "Because I live here now," she said, as if this were obvious, and returned to her book. I found this answer, for reasons I did not examine immediately, more interesting than most things said to me at breakfast. By the second month she had developed a habit of sitting in the window alcove off the eastern corridor in the late afternoons, where the winter light came in low and cold and clear. She brought her reading there, or correspondence. She was writing to someone in Cresthalo, I knew from my steward, the schoolmaster who had taken over her class. She never asked for the alcove to be reserved. She simply occupied it when it was empty, which it always was, because no one else sat in the eastern corridor alcove in late afternoon. I passed it on my way to the map room, every day, at the same time. I did not stop. But I became aware, with the peripheral attention of a king who notices things he has not decided to notice, that she was always there, and that the light was always the same, and that she never looked up when I passed unless I stopped, which I had not done, and which therefore meant she was not watching for me but simply present in the way she was present everywhere. Without demand, without performance, simply herself in a cold winter window with a book. The third month she appeared at the edge of my council session. This required some explanation. My council met in the Eastern Hall on the first morning of every moon, and the Eastern Hall was adjacent to the library, and Marin had apparently been unaware of this schedule when she came to the library door and found it occupied. My steward had told her the library would be available after midday. She had thanked him and turned to leave. My first elder, Gareth, a man of 60 years' service who expressed opinions about everything through the medium of pointed silence, had looked at the door, and then at me with the expression of a man making a note. I said before I had decided to say it, she may wait in the eastern alcove. The session will not run past midday. Gareth made his note louder. After the council I passed the alcove. She was reading. I stopped, which I had not done before. The library is available, I said. I know, she said. The light is better here. She looked up briefly. Your council runs efficiently. I could hear the pacing through the door. Most councils, in my experience, spend 30% of their time repeating things that have already been said. You have experience of councils, I said. My father's, she said, before. She said the word with the particular evenness of someone who has had a great deal of practice saying it. He was thorough but slow. You're not slow. No, I said. She returned to her book. I went to the map room. I thought, for several hours afterward, about the word before, and the evenness with which she had said it, and the fact that she had offered the comparison without self-pity and without editing, which was exactly what she had told me she would do, and which I had agreed to, and which I was finding, now that I was directly encountering it, to be more arresting than I had anticipated. The fourth month she was honest at my council table. This was my error. I had, at Gareth's suggestion, and with more thought than I was willing to attribute to her specifically, invited her to the following month's council session. The border corridor formalization required her formal signature on 3 documents, and it was more efficient to have her present than to courier the papers. She came, sat at the indicated seat, signed the indicated documents, and was preparing to leave when Gareth, who had been watching the efficiency of her document review with the expression of a man revising an assessment, asked her opinion of the Cresthalo water rights dispute, which was the next item on the agenda and which had been unresolved for 18 months. She stayed. She gave her opinion, which was that the dispute had been framed incorrectly from the beginning, that the question was not water rights but watershed access, and that both parties had been arguing about the wrong boundary line for a year and a half because the original surveying had been done in summer, when the watershed ran differently than in winter. There was a silence. Gareth said, "When were you in Cresthalo?" "I lived there for 4 years," she said. "I walked the watershed every spring when it flooded the lower schoolroom." She looked at me. "I can draw the winter line from memory if it would help." It helped. The dispute was resolved in 6 weeks. Gareth stopped making pointed silences. He started making pointed looks instead, directed at me, which were in some ways worse. What I was not prepared for, and I want to be precise about this, because precision is the only way to say it accurately, was what happened to the hall when she was in it. Not dramatically. Nothing she did was dramatic. It was the opposite of drama. It was the gradual, unremarkable reordering of a space by someone who moved through it with such consistent steadiness that the space began to conform to her rather than the reverse. The kitchen staff learned that she took her morning tea without honey because she asked once and they remembered. The outer hall wolves, 3 elderly pack wolves who had lived in the hall since before my father's time and who were famously indifferent to newcomers, began spending their afternoons in the eastern corridor. My head groundskeeper, a taciturn man named Bryn who had spoken to me in full sentences perhaps 4 times in 12 years, was apparently holding twice-weekly conversations with her about the winter drainage of the South Meadow. I knew all of this because my steward told me, with the carefully neutral tone of a man delivering information he suspects will require the recipient to sit down. I did not sit down. I filed the information and continued governing. What I could not file, and this is the part I am less comfortable accounting for, was the bond. I had felt it from the first week, not as a dramatic ignition, nothing so useful as that, but as a pressure, the particular weight of something true that has not yet been acknowledged. I am an alpha king. I know what the mate bond is in the lore, in the history, in the accounts of it that every alpha is given to read. I had been waiting for it for 36 years with the patience of a man who is not certain it is coming. What I had not expected was that it would arrive this gradually, that it would not announce itself but simply accumulate, like snow on a window ledge, until the accumulation was impossible to pretend was nothing. By the 5th month I knew what it was. I did not tell her. This was not deception. She had made no claim on the bond, had no reason to expect it, was living her life in my hall with the practical dignity of someone who had agreed to a specific arrangement and was keeping to its terms. To tell her that the arrangement had become something else from my side, without her knowledge, through no action of hers, seemed both unfair and unlikely to produce a useful outcome. She was not pretending to be content. She was not pretending to be discontent. She was simply there honestly, which was what she had promised. I was the one pretending. Pretending the weight in my chest was manageable. Pretending the eastern corridor alcove was not a waypoint I had begun to think about at other times of day. Pretending the watershed survey she had drawn from memory, which was now the key document in a resolved border dispute, was not still sitting on my desk because I had not put it away. The 6th month she argued with me about the Eastern Bridge repairs. She had been to Cresthaloe twice since coming to Caldenmere's Hall, short visits to see the schoolmaster and check on the drainage project with Bryn, and she had crossed the Eastern Bridge both times and found it worse on the second crossing than on the first. She brought this to my steward, who brought it to me, and I reviewed the inspection report and concluded the bridge was within acceptable structural parameters. She came to my study. "It's not within acceptable parameters," she said, without preamble. "The central support is showing stress fractures that the report describes as minor deformation, but which in my assessment, having stood on the bridge in 2 different freeze cycles, are progressing." "You're not a structural engineer," I said. "No," she said. "I'm someone who walked across it twice and noticed that the shutter on the second crossing was different in quality from the first. That's not engineering. It's observation." I looked at her across the desk. She was not angry. She was not performing concern. She was simply telling me what she had observed, with the precision she brought to everything, and waiting to see if I would hear it. I sent a second inspection team. They found advancing stress fractures in the central support. The bridge was repaired in 3 weeks. She did not say "I told you so." She thanked my steward and went back to the eastern alcove. I sat in my study for some time after the second inspection report arrived, thinking about observation and the difference between knowing something from documents and knowing it from walking across it twice in different freeze cycles, and thinking about the fact that she had come directly to my study rather than continuing through my steward, which was the arrangement's prescribed channel, and which she had departed from because the matter was urgent and the prescribed channel was slower, and which suggested that she had made a calculation about when to follow the arrangement's terms and when to set them aside in favor of what was actually needed. This was, I recognized, the same calculation I made every day as a king. I had not expected to find it in her. The 7th month, a Tuesday in deep winter, she was honest in the way that broke everything open. I had not planned for a conversation that evening. I had been in the map room until late, working through the spring supply allocations for the northern border holds, and I came through the eastern corridor at a time when the alcove was usually empty. It was not empty. She was there, not reading, sitting with her hands in her lap and looking out at the snow that had been falling since midday, a single candle on the ledge beside her, the rest of the corridor dark. I stopped. This was unusual enough, her sitting without a book, without correspondence, simply looking at the snow, that I stopped. "My lord," she said without turning. She had heard me. "It's late," I said, which was not a useful observation but was the first thing that came. "Yes," she said. She did not elaborate. I should have continued to the map room. Instead I said, "Are you well?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to look at me, and her expression was the expression of someone who has been keeping their single condition faithfully for 7 months and has arrived at the edge of it. "I've kept my condition," she said. "I've never asked you to find me content when I'm not. I've never performed anything I don't have." She paused. "But there is something I am not saying which is different from pretending, and I think you should know that I am not saying it." I moved to the other end of the window ledge and sat. The snow beyond the casement was the particular heavy snow of Caldenmere's deep winter, steady and without drama. "What aren't you saying?" I said. She looked at the snow. "That I can no longer," she stopped, started again with the precision she always brought to difficult things. "I can maintain this arrangement as agreed. I can be appropriate and civil and non-disruptive indefinitely. What I cannot do is continue without acknowledging, at minimum to myself, that I care what you think of me, which is not part of the arrangement, which I did not plan for. Which is therefore," she looked at her hands, "something I am responsible for managing privately, and which I am mentioning now because not mentioning it felt, tonight, more dishonest than the condition allowed." The snow fell. The mate mark burned. Not a flash, not the ignition I had read about in 36 years of lore, but the final settling of something that had been accumulating for 7 months, the snow reaching the ledge, the weight becoming undeniable. I felt it in my left wrist, in my chest, in the particular silence that follows an acknowledgement that has been true for a long time. "Marin," I said. She looked up. "I have not been managing it privately," I said. "I have been managing it badly for approximately 5 months, and telling myself it was not my place to say anything." She was very still. "The mate mark," I said. I turned my left wrist over in the candlelight. It was fully visible now, not faint, not preliminary, but settled and permanent, silver-white tracing the inner bones, warm where the light touched it. "It has been present since the 5th month. I did not tell you because the arrangement didn't give me the right to change the terms from my side without your agreement." She looked at my wrist for a long moment. Then she said, with the evenness she brought to all true things, "That is exactly the kind of restraint I would expect from you, and exactly the kind of thing I find," she stopped, chose the honest word, "devastating." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said. "I would rather know it now than not know it." She looked at me. "What happens now?" "That depends," I said, "on what you want, not on the arrangement." "On what you want." She was quiet for a long time. The candle on the ledge burned steadily. The snow outside was the only sound, which in deep Caldenmere winter is a very quiet sound, almost nothing, the accumulated weight of small things falling. "I want," she said carefully, "to renegotiate the terms." The following morning, I called the full pack council. Gareth, who had been making pointed looks for 4 months, received the news of the formal dissolution of the no rights, no name clause with the expression of a man who had been expecting this specific conversation and had merely been waiting to see how long it took. He said nothing, which was the loudest thing he had said in the entire year. The other council members received it with the particular efficiency of people who had spent 7 months watching a watershed survey remain on their Alpha King's desk, and had drawn their own conclusions. The formal declaration was made before the full pack, in the great stone hall with the winter light coming through the high windows, and Maren stood beside me with the composure she brought to everything, not performing anything, not pretending to more certainty than she had, simply present and steady in the way she was always present and steady. And when I spoke the words that gave her every right the arrangement had withheld, she did not cry, which I had not expected her to, and she did not smile widely, which I had also not expected, and what she did instead was look at me once, briefly, with the expression of someone who has made a decision and is entirely at peace with it. That expression undid me more completely than anything else had, which I say as a man who had governed a kingdom alone for 11 years and had considered himself largely undoable. That was 7 winters ago. Maren is in the eastern corridor alcove this morning. She still uses it, even now, because the light is still better there in the late afternoon, and because a habit of 4 months does not cease being the right habit simply because circumstances change. She is writing, which she does most mornings now, correspondence to the 3 border villages whose drainage projects she has been overseeing for the last 2 years, which became her work after the South Meadow project with Bryn proved, as she had quietly expected it would, that she understood the land in a particular and practical way that turned out to be rather useful to a kingdom that had been governing its borderlands from documents for too long. Gareth retired last spring. His replacement, a younger woman named Tessely, sought Maren's assessment of the northern border supply routes in her first week and has been doing so regularly since, which Gareth would have approved of and did approve of in the last months before he left. The mate mark is settled, permanently silver-white on my wrist, warm in the way of things that have found their right place and stopped moving. It is warm most often in the mornings when I pass the eastern corridor and she is in the alcove, and I stop, which I do now, and she looks up. She said to me last winter, in the way she says the true things, quietly, without fanfare, as if she is simply telling me what she observed, that she had expected the arrangement to be survivable, that she had not expected to find, inside a contract written in the language of political necessity, something that felt more chosen than anything she had chosen for herself. I told her I had expected to manage the arrangement efficiently, that I had not expected to sit in a map room at midnight thinking about watershed surveys and the word before. She said, "You kept the drawing." "I did," I said. "That," she said, "was the first honest thing you did." She was right. It was also, in retrospect, the moment the accumulation began, the snow on the ledge, the weight that would eventually be undeniable. I had not known it then. I know it now, in the way of things understood fully only in the settled light of years. She came to my hall with no rights and no name and one condition, honesty. She kept it faithfully for 7 months. And what she taught me, without trying, without performing, by simply remaining herself inside a cold stone hall in the deep of a Caldenmere winter, was that the only governance worth anything is the kind you cannot do at a distance. She is the truest thing in my kingdom. She is also the only thing in it that I have never, not for a single morning in 7 winters, wanted to govern at all.